My name is Ballam. I'm with the San Diego and Imperial NADEC. I'm happy to be here today. My day job, I'm with San Diego State University. I'm in the Fowler College of Business, where I serve as managing director of the Wendy Gillespie Center for Advancing Global Business, where our mission is to help U.S. companies compete better overseas. And we do that by helping to train the workforce, yes, those people that come to work for you after they graduate from our schools. So thank you all for being here. We have a wonderful panel. I let the panel know that I will not be reading their bio, so I did ask them to talk a little bit about themselves, what they do, what their firm does, and to give you a better sense of their perspective. So first, without further ado, we'll get right to our first speaker today. It is Simona Racek. She is the Director of Global Trade at Getting to Global, and she also represents the San Diego and Imperial NADEC. Simona.
Thank you, Mark, for the invitation. It's a true pleasure to be in person, seeing all of you in person, and to be part of this year's National NADEC Conference. Today, I would like, before I start, to find out who my audience is today. So how many of you have structured and managed an international trade transaction from the beginning to end? Wow, it's going to be tough to say that. How many of you are exporters? How many of you have heard of the new ICC rules, uniform rules for digital trade transactions? Well, thank you for allowing me to. Sure. Thank you for allowing me to get to know you a little bit. Today I'll be presenting the e-digital trade transaction workspace. For short, I'll refer to it as the EDTT workspace. It is enables digital trade transaction for SMEs globally. It is a solution that helps manage digital trade online using digital documents instead of paper. It is sponsored by the San Diego and Imperial District Export Council. There's two people managing the project. Myself is the project leader. I'm a committee member with the San Diego and Imperial NADEC. And my colleague, John Ballam, who is the trade financing expert, the brilliant mind behind building this workspace. He built this workspace on his 30 years experience of structuring documentary letter of credit. Since Mark did not read my bio, here's my bio. I work in the private sector. I'm the Director of Global Trade at Getting to Global. It's an innovative technology company that provides solutions and programs to multiply the impact of economic development of organizations and trade organizations around the world. I also one of my roles is to serve as an export advisor at the Los Angeles SBDC Natural Global Department. I work with Dr. Rubin, San Diego Trade Center and Ventura Economic Development Collaborative. I'm also the president of Organization of Women in Trade, Orange County chapter. We are an international organization united around the globe to promote trade and women in business and women in international trade. So let's get straight to our topic today. How do we get to a digital future from where we are today? So we are still heavily paper-based processes. We have 4 billion documents circulating in the trade system. We need to digitize the flow. We need to arrive to automation. We still have limited access to trade finance, with 1.5 trillion of trade finance gap that persists that went after in COVID to 1.7 trillion, and it's really heavily negatively impacting the SMEs. We need to reduce the cost of capital and arrive to financial inclusion. We need to work on removing barriers and updating laws and align legal frameworks. And what I will be discussing today, what we build at the San Diego and Imperial NADEC is we develop a digital standard that can be adopted, that can be used, that's free and accessible to everybody. So I don't have to explain this slide to all of you, but how many of you had to explain this slide to your new-to-export SMEs? This is what trade looks like today. It's complex, it's costly, it's painful for our buyers and sellers. It has numerous players, numerous documents, numerous elements. So let's look at the traditional paper trade transaction complexity and cost. This is a traditional paper UCP documentary letter of credit. You have 3 banks involved here. You have document couriers. You have there's time, there's fees, there's a lot of complexity involved in this debate. And what we did with the EDTT workspace and what the new rules allow us from International Chamber of Commerce is to eliminate some of the parties in order to reduce the cost and complexity. We are eliminating the banks, we're eliminating the document courier, and the invoicing platform doesn't really affect us at the moment. So let's get to the definition of what is this workspace, the EDTT workspace. It's an open source digital trade management solution that enables the buyer and the seller to trade globally. The workspace objective is to increase international trade and to make trade more inclusive by reducing the cost and complexity of trade. With interactive cloud-based documents, video conferences, a common business method to be used by buyer and seller, and of course the International Chamber of Commerce rules. And you can see in the right corner what it looks like. If you go to edttworkspace.com, you'll find the framework, you'll find all the forms, the documents, and underneath this image you will find the business method that's being used. The authority, as mentioned, we have the URDTT, the Uniform Rules for Digital Trade Transaction, that was published by International Chamber of Commerce in October of 2021. It has a guide implementing URDTT that defines the roles, defines the process. It's an 84-page guideline to help you structure and manage a transaction. We're using the CP600, the same rules and standards since 1933, latest version from 2007. We are using the supplement to the EUCP, the latest version 2.0 from 2019. You can see underneath the first version of the EUCP came out in 2002 for electronic presentation, and it has not been used, so it's time that we use the EUCP. And we'll reference the EURC, the supplement to the EURC 500 as well. So let's take a quick look at the URDT. It provides a fully digital environment. It's neutral to regarding what technology and messaging the buyer and seller are using. And the big value, the beauty of these new rules is that it extends into the corporate space, including commercial transactions and the growing community of non-bank providers of financial services. How many non-bank providers of financial services we have here today? I see you, Peter. So what are the benefits of these new rules to the buyer and sellers? Payment commitment, enhanced provision for risk mitigation, reduced complexity. It's a fast process. It decreases non-compliance. It less disputes, timely settlement, lower operational outlay, and hopefully I managed to get through all of this today. There's 17 articles in the URDT, and it's free to download it from the ICC together with the implementing guide. And any question you may have for me today, the answer is going to be in those 17 articles. Let's look at the role of the financial service provider, the non-bank institution that's being added into a digital trade transaction. It's a provision of financing and risk mitigation to the principal parties. The role is to effect payment to the beneficiary at site or on a fixed or determined a future day, according to the terms and conditions in the financial service payment undertaking. To the right, we see the form, which is the payment undertaking financial document that you will find on the workspace. And now let's look at the EDTT workspace. This is what it looks like. It brings together into one solution in face-to-face video conferences the buyer and the seller, the ICC e-rules with no banks, no paper, no couriers. It has the global business model, that's the common business method used between the buyer and seller. It has webinars for training and understanding the forms, the information you have to fill in the forms, and the relationship between each of the tasks and the buyer or the seller that the party has to perform. And I want to emphasize that this diagram is not a future dream and solution that you could use in the future. This is used today with clients, SMEs from the Los Angeles BDC. We use it to help small businesses transact online without the papers, without the banks, and without the couriers. The documents are being presented electronically. And this is what a digital trade transaction looks like. You have the buyer, the obligor, initiating a digital trade transaction with a purchase order and supported by a payment obligation to the seller, the beneficiary. The terms and conditions are being determined by the digital trade payment. And the payment method is a collection with the buyer, with the seller presenting the documents online, electronically, including the bill of lading, invoicing, packing list. And please now we're talking about consigned to the buyer bill of lading. We're not talking about non-negotiable bill of lading here. And the beauty of the URDT is that the buyer now can nominate a financial service provider to undertake the payment obligation buyer and to make the payment to the buyer through the payment undertaking financial document. The business method, it is very simple. This is the structure, this diagram is the structure of today's transaction. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We are using the same exact payment method that is used by documentary letter of credit. We're just replacing the payment facility, digital trade payment document with the new rules. You start with the request for quotation and you go all the way to the end to presentation electronically of the document. In order to receive the payment, you present the documentation online. However, the customs might require that you have original, as we know, but this is about the payment and not the customs. So let's take a quick look at the paper trade transaction today and the digital trade payment. What's the comparing the two? So today in the paper trade transaction, we have 11,000 banks involved. In digital trade payment, we have no banks, but we have 298 million buyers and sellers ready to trade. In the paper trade, we have about 26 original paper documents and up to 240 copies, 100 plus 240 copies of these documents circulating in our system. In DTP, you have original digital documents. The payment method available to the buyer and seller today in a paper transaction, 10% of those transactions you have access to documentary letter of credit that includes negotiation. It takes approximately 24 days for payment, could be less than that, approximately 24. The rest, the 90% of the buyer and seller will be using some form of collection, including documents against payment. There's no negotiation for DAP. It will take about 14 days for payment. If we move to the right side, for digital trade payment transaction, there's no banks involved. It really takes just the transfer of the money from a bank to the other, about 4 days for payment. It includes, and it's very important, collection and negotiation at all time. The rules, as discussed earlier, you have the UCP and URC on the paper trade. We use the URDT and the EUCP on the digital trade transaction. When we look at the cost for documentary letter of credit, depending on the bank, the fees will be somewhere between 1 plus percentage of the transaction. The cost for documentary documents against payment is 500 plus courier fees, but again, there's no negotiation. Where with the digital trade transaction, if we manage to teach the buyer and the seller how to transact, how to negotiate, it will be 0% of the transaction, but there are companies that you can hire as trade management transaction to help you add a fraction of the bank fees today. The one we work with is ITF Global. They charge 280 euros per transaction up to 100,000 and 1,200 for a million transaction. Am I doing on time?
You're good.
I'm good. How many more? 15 minutes, that's great. So for the protocol, we use, there's courier and SWIFT system for the paper trade. We use electronic record submission, URDT, EUCP, and the DTP, the digital trade payment documents followed MT700 SWIFT format. So again, it's an open source trade management solution. We want this to be the digital standard. There's no cost in access globally, so please take a look at it. Call me, ask me a question about it. Let's collaborate. Let's spread the word of the new ways of doing trade. Let's think of supporting the companies, the small businesses that do not have access to banking solutions. I have the email as a project leader, the email for my colleague John Ballam on this slide as well. And now what are the next steps for digitization and automation? The current workspace is not automated. It's the documents, the forms for you to download and interact with, but we need to automate it. So this is, like I said, the digital standard. That is what we built. And now looking at the private sector, we really need the industry to adopt it and transform it. And this is the work I do in the private sector and getting to global. We build economic development programs, tools, and data services that support the impact of trade organization throughout the world. These are for products that we have available. We have a STEP navigator to support companies to apply for STEP grants to cover some of the IP or regulatory compliance costs. We have the agribusiness navigator that supports companies to build an international marketing plan and apply for reimbursement for international marketing fees. We have the export financing navigator that will link you to your alternative financing in your community. Who is the micro lender? Who is the community advantage lender if you do not qualify for SBA and EXIM loans? And we have the Export Connect platform. That's the larger platforms will connect you to a third-party provider as well. What we are doing and getting to global is we are taking the EDTT workspace and we are turning it into an educational platform that will be free of access for everyone around the world. We'll go through the sales, performance, logistics, settlements modules. We're launching this in Q3, and again, it's going to be free of access for all. And we have forms, interactive forms. We have webinars. And then the next program will be a certification program where we really want to teach the buyer, the seller, freight forwarders, anybody who's interested of the new rules and how to transact online, how to finish a transaction from the beginning to end. You will go through case studies, exercises, there will be resources to explain, videos explaining how to fill out a purchase order, a payment facility document, and you will end with a capstone, an evaluation, an exam, and a certification. And lastly, this is the slide I like to leave you all with, where I would really like to collaborate again with the private sector, with the technology companies, where we take the workspace, we take the standard, and we turn it into a product, a transaction navigator, where buyer and seller can come and step-by-step complete a transaction from the beginning to end. And this is where the blockchain solution, the blueprint solution, the AI solution could be integrated in here. Alternative financing and the growing community of fintech lenders could be integrated in here. Education would be integrated in here. So this is where I really welcome anybody who is interested in working on the project to reach out to us. This is my phone number, my mobile, and my email. Thank you for your time, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Simona. Thank you very much. We already have some questions. But I had one for you guys though first. How many of you are still using paper to do your trade transactions? Okay, there's lots of hands over there. So hopefully this is helpful. Let's start with this gentleman first.
Very smart with CDEC. Very smart with CDEC. One of the questions is, because I come from the trade and credit industry, how do you guarantee the payment between the buyer and the seller? Like if you want to give somebody 90-day terms or 60-day term, you sell them the product, what guarantees do you have that you're going to get paid according to your terms? Are you using an escrow approach to guarantee that payment between seller and buyer?
No, it is basically the same guarantee you have today. What's your guarantee today for the payment for an open term?
my credit due diligence, right? My guarantee. What I do is I do my credit due diligence to make sure that the customer has been vetted. If I want to give them cash in advance, then they have to trust me. They have to vet me. I want to give them terms. I want to know that they are really stellar, helping according to the agreed upon terms.
Yes, you could talk to Peter Clemente here. He's a financial service provider and he has a very rigorous vetting process as well. So we are not eliminating the vetting process. We're not eliminating the digital transaction. We're just giving the medium of doing this online without the paper, but we're not eliminating any of the due diligence that you have to go through today. It's your bank or it's the financial service provider who will go through the due diligence. You can use U.S. Commercial Service to do a company profile for $750 to make sure, or for $1,200 with U.S. Commercial Service you do a thorough company vetting process.
So really then you're eliminating the letter of credit approach. So because the banks take a lot of money, you are saving them.
You got it, sir, that's it.
Okay, perfect.
Hi Simona, my name is Sam with Fast Track Global Services, and we work with a lot of US companies that are constantly engaging in international trade, and we face two constant problems. One of them is how do they build confidence between the two parties? How will your solution help with confidence building? And then also in regards to the timeline, is your platform going to be available 24/7? Because when we are working, they're sleeping, and when they are working, we are sleeping. And so that causes a lot of delays, and I've seen a lot of times the deals just fall apart because it just takes too long. So I'm just wondering, how will your solution help? Thanks.
Hey Sam, good to see you again. You were at the World Trade Center, the World Trade Week Los Angeles 2 weeks ago. The beauty of the workspace is the fact that you can build trust between buyer and seller, because if you bring the buyer and seller together in a Zoom conference from the beginning, and you help them reach that purchase order, finalizing the purchase order, closing the deal. How many of your clients start the deal and they never end the deal?
50%.
50% of
Sorry.
clients. So, and that has to do with building trust in trade. I mean, from the beginning of time, trade was built on trust. So bringing the video conference, and I see it happening today. You bring the buyer and seller, they get to know each other, they understand the process, the information that's needed to complete that purchase order and start the process. It's so much faster, and it's accessible 24 hours. If you want to fill out your purchase order and your request for quotation and acknowledgement at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can do that, and then you email it. So it really cuts out the time, and when it comes down to the payment time, it really only takes the transfer time, which is 4 days to make the payment.
So, if I may ask, is there a way where you guys can handhold both parties so that, because there's a lot lost in translation, and both parties may be talking about the same thing, but they're just constantly lost, and that just takes a lot of time, and we see issues with that.
Every single document in a digital trade transaction or in a paper transaction is a task to be complete by the buyer and the seller. You make it very clear that this is the task, this is the information required. Here's a webinar of me explaining you what to put in the purchase order, what information is needed for the next document, what is the next step. And yes, you can contact us at any time. We have 15, I think, DAC members ready to help you transaction and to help you structure and to help you with the payment method as well. And as I said, there is, for very small fees, we have transaction manager that would charge, like I said, €280 per 100,000 transaction to actually sit with you and handhold you through the whole process. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
You're tapping me to fix them. I think I should take it. I want to show you what. I don't know if I'm connected to internet to show you what it really works. I'm not connected to internet, so you could, if you go to edttworkspace.com, you will see the entire format of all the documents you need with the business model underneath. So, yeah, I'm not connected to internet. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We're going to shift tracks just a bit and move over to our other panelists. We have Jonathan Szucs, who is General Manager at Advanced Superabrasives. He's also a Vice Chair of the National NADEC, and he's also Chair of events, including this one. Jonathan, thanks for being here. And Tom Robinson, who's owner and founder of Biz Advisors, but he's also on the board of X Culture. And what they're going to talk about today is working with universities and university students in sort of a win-win arrangement where the university students or the students get a great experience and the customer, the client, the business gets a great product to help them improve their exports. So we call it experiential learning at the university, but the businesses call it consulting. So let me turn it over to Jonathan first to talk about the experience you had just recently with some graduate students from Southern California and Mexico.
So thank you. For those of you that don't know, my day job, it's not Vice Chair of the NADEC. I actually run a company that makes grinding wheels. So people are going, what's grinding wheels? Well, what are they? Well, if you got a COVID shot and a needle went in your arm and it didn't hurt, you're welcome. Our wheels ground the tips of those needles that went in your arms. So that's the easiest way I can explain it. But whether it's your automobile, the plane you fly in, the phones you're on, the computers you're on, grinding wheels are everything. They grind, we make grinding wheels that grind every kind of component and material you can imagine. We always joke that if it wasn't for grinding wheels, the world wouldn't turn. So, that's what we do. But it's also a very difficult product to sell because we make the tools that make the tools that make products. And so, because it's so difficult, and we want to be in so many countries, and our industry keeps growing, the question becomes, how do we leverage as an SME resources to help us grow our business internationally? And so for years, what we've found is that by using interns or programs, and then I have two programs. That's why I'm in the middle, because I actually use both programs from these gentlemen. So, both programs I'll talk about here in a minute, but the reason why we like the interns is multifold. One, the students get experience. Two, we get work done that we don't have the resources to do. Three, a lot of times you end up with some future employees. So, there's a lot of benefits to working with educational institutions like universities and having interns. My group at work will tell you that if we don't have interns, I'm probably either extremely sick or dead because we always have interns on international programs. Every semester we have some kind, and through the summer, I have it through the summer as well. We don't have our interns just yet, but the guys over there, Owen George, writing it down because he knows his boss has to give me the interns for the summer. But anyway, what we find is that we have used cross-border consulting here recently, and I'll explain to you the project real quick. I mentioned the COVID vaccines. There is a huge influx of medical device manufacturers moving into Mexico. Why? Supply chain crisis. We all know why that's going on. So Tijuana is one of the largest areas of growth for medical component manufacturers. So what we did is we partnered with cross-border consulting and Mark's team, and we said, all we want you to focus on is where in Mexico these companies are, who they are, where they hold the purchasing power, and how do we get to them. And so the students, and I had about 16 students, we had 6 students for our team. They did an excellent job. They were Zoom calling me on Saturdays. I mean, normally getting me on Saturdays is almost impossible. They were calling me on Saturdays, asking questions, wanting to know, hey, if we got you the names of associations that we think you should join, what do you think about that? What do you think about distribution channels? What do you think about your sales strategy? And so they really went in depth to find out what our goals were, what our strategies are internationally, and how can they best help us. And at the end, they give us a final report. They gave me one spreadsheet with so many contacts for all these companies that they had actually contacted that I couldn't go through all of it yet. So, but the presentation was very straightforward. These are the 3 regions in Mexico. Tijuana is the hottest growing region. You need to start there. Here are the major companies. Oh, by the way, their purchasing is all done in the US. So you can get into Mexico and talk to them, but chances are the U.S. is where they're making the decision. So we not only got the context for Mexico, but you get the contacts for the U.S. on where you can start your strategy. And then they add in, oh, by the way, your website needs this improvement, that improvement. Just figure a millennial's telling me my website's not 100%. And especially after you just spend a lot of time spending money on it, they go, well, if you could just tweak this, we think your SEO would work better. But it's just great to work with these students, and what you get is way more than what you put in, monetarily, time-wise, anything. And then again, what's nice is the students afterwards, after you get the report, they come back to you and they go, what questions do you have? I mean, they're still emailing me today, like, do you have any questions about our report? Can we do anything else? What can we do? And so that's story number one. So that's Mark. So I took care of Mark. Now we're going to talk about story number two, and I don't want to get too far into it because I know Tom's going to talk about it. But we used Tom for X-Culture to do a project, and Tom will explain that to you. But I can tell you that the experiences are extremely similar, meaning getting to use these students, what they bring, you can't really put a dollar value on it, okay? Because they're doing market research, they're doing a lot of things that you don't have time for. And not only that, they're bringing these ideas. And sometimes they're great ideas, and then other times you get ideas and you're scratching your head and you're going, you know, I make diamond grinding wheels, but they're not for grinding diamonds. You know, I'm not the beers. You know, I use the beers to put in my wheels, but I don't sell any to the beers. But yeah, it's just interesting when you get students that go a little bit off track. But what I've found is that in all these programs, it's invaluable to work with these students. I normally like to hire my interns if I can. Sometimes if they're in California and don't want to move from sunny Southern California to the dreary mountains of North Carolina, and I say dreary, you know, just in jest because it's wonderful being in the mountains of North Carolina. But you know, if I can't get them there, it's very difficult. But what they also allow you to do is both organizations have students outside the country. So we actually had a student in Tijuana, and with Tom's program in X-Culture, I had students from France. I had a Dutch student who was studying in Germany, and I was asking him how he got there. You know, I was just amazed by the amount of students and where they're at and what they bring to the table. And they actually, I will say, it's sad to say, the international students get the exporting from the beginning. The US students are the ones where I'm always hand-holding and kind of saying, no guys, you know, there is a world outside our 50 United States or continental 48. They really don't want to talk about Alaska or Hawaii, but I always say there is a world outside of there more than just to travel to, and there's a lot of exporting going on. So when you have these programs, when you see these international students, you can really tell because they're always the first ones to come up with something because that's the life that they live. But I'll stop there because I know Tom's going to talk about X-Culture, but anybody that has questions about it, I know we're limited on time today, feel free to reach out to me, and I will give you, you know, realistic examples, show you spreadsheets, whatever you want to see, reports, and you can be the judge for yourself. But Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. I just want to go on the record. I just came back from Istanbul, and the reason why I'm here is that they threatened that I could not come back into the country until such time as I showed up here. So, just kidding. Anyway, X-Culture, very, very interesting organization. One of the things that I read while I was traveling recently was a little bit of information that I thought was very interesting to this whole subject. And is somewhere, something remarkable is waiting to be discovered. And I would hope that all of you today, between the programs, will find something remarkable that you've discovered today that you didn't know about. But X-Culture, let me just very briefly give you the history of it because it's kind of fascinating. About in 2010, Dr. Vost Horace, an international professor at UNCG in Greensboro, University of North Carolina, Greensboro, had a challenge, and it was that his students, as Jonathan said, were not getting it. They just weren't getting it. And so he reached out to the Academy of International Businesses and discovered that he was not alone. There were other professors in other universities around the world that were having the same challenge. So X-Culture was formed, and the first X-Culture was about 400 international students from 7 different universities. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, just to bring you up to stride on what's going on today. We just finished our session, our last semester session, and by the end of the year, X-Culture will have graduated through the program 100,000 undergraduates and MBA graduates in international business throughout the world. We are connected with 500 universities, and it's a volunteer organization. And basically, a lot of those volunteers are university professors that are very scholarly and very, very interesting and very dynamic universities and colleges around the world. I have a very distinct advantage or situation because I can actually sit down and, as a board member of the X-Culture, be able to sit down and talk to Dr. Buzz. I'm also very unique in that I'm the only board member that is not a professor. And so it gets kind of interesting sometimes. X-Culture is open source. The original purpose of it was to provide universities and educators on that level information that would allow them to do a better job in teaching international business. And it has worked tremendously well. To me, there are 5 different lenses going on here, 3 of which are very appropriate to the academic side, and 2 of which, to me, are very appropriate on the business side. And I'll go through the academic ones very, very quickly. I've already mentioned one, and it's the advantage universities have in gaining and gleaning through all this open source information to make their universities better in that arena. The second one is the students themselves. And I'll get into the wherefores and whys in a couple of minutes, but basically, if you've been keeping track of what's going on with C-suite executives throughout the world, they have a challenge. And the challenge today is that a lot of the graduates coming through don't have, and I don't like these words, soft skills, living skills, whatever you want to call them. They're very technically driven, but they don't know how to interact. They don't know how to meet challenges, how to work as team members. And X-Culture, as they go through this whole semester, has given these skills to these young people. And as a result, a lot of them come back and volunteer as coaches to coach others. And now they're professionals, but they're still giving back because they saw so much value in being involved in the whole process. The third lens is X-Culture is a living, dynamic organization, always changing. And a few years back, we decided, well, if we can catch them earlier, maybe we can get them more involved. So we started X-Culture Academy, which was involving high school students. To date, we've probably done about 8,000 students throughout the world. And so the challenge that we have in the US is that our academics, public school-wise, are very structured as opposed to other countries. And as a result, a lot of the US students that we have going through it are either homeschooled or private school. To give you an example of what other nations think about X-Culture, we had India come to us about 3 years ago and say, look, we want to enroll 40,000 students. And that was in just one area. Obviously, we couldn't do that because we didn't have the bandwidth. But the next lens is something that is important to businesses, and it's the industry lens, the ability to help SMEs find paths to questions that they have about outside the US that would normally not be available to them because of cost. Large corporations can go out and hire someone, a consultant, to go and pay $100,000 to figure out, is this the marketplace for me or not? SMEs can. And let me kind of just go into SMEs a little bit because the SBA's definition of SMEs is a little bit interesting to me, because it involves 1,500, less than 1,500 employees, or $38.5 million. Now, I don't know how many SMEs you know that fit those particular parameters, but that's a real challenge when you start to talk about small business. So I did a little digging, and the U.S. consensus, this last reporting in 2020 that was taken and just published this year, is very interesting because it not only does population, but it does a whole bunch of other things. And I've written this stuff down because my memory isn't what it used to be. Okay, but when it comes to SMEs, SMEs represent 97% of all exporters. However, SMEs account for 33% of export values. Diving in a little deeper, SMEs that are 0 to 99 employees are 91% of the known exporters, but only 20% of the value. And then going a little bit deeper, and this is the one that really is interesting to me, is SMEs that are 0 to 19 employees represent 76% of all known exporters, but only 14% of known export dollars. The top 50 exporters that are not SMEs account for 48% of our export values. The small SMEs need help, and in a whole different variety of areas, as we all know. But if we can provide to them a system where they can go in and ask very specific questions on what they need or what they need to find out about to go into a particular market, it's very valuable to them. They feel more comfortable making that step. It might be packaging. It might be, do I do this region or do I do that region? What are the import challenges that take place? Now, how the X culture does it is kind of unique and very structured. What we do is we will actually comprise teams of not more than 7 individuals, college grads or soon to be. And we will pose those questions as Jonathan has gone through and what are your needs? What do you want to know about? But of the 7, no more than 2 are US citizens. All the rest are from around the world. So I think in your case, we had about 34 groups and about 200 and some odd students out there answering and looking at certain questions that Jonathan had in his company. And out of those, as you mentioned, there will be reports that are and then others that will be pretty good. And then there's going to be that group that are extremely, extremely interesting, that cause the SME to stop and think, reconsider, or feel comfortable with the next step. So we have now, this last session, we have gone through, I think, about 7,600 students. And we have done work for not only small SMEs, but also for large corporations. And I've listed some of them here in large organizations. Louis Vuitton, Mercedes-Benz, even did work for the Nashville Chamber of Commerce, Hard Rock Cafe International, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, and several others. So, and what we found out was that a lot of the reporting that we have done holds up very, very well to consultants that they spend lots and lots of dollars for. And the reason for it is we have boots on the ground. We have, it's like ants going out and trying to find and forage for food. All kinds of situations, working in teams. So it's a very interesting approach, and it has tremendous value. Now, we are in discussions with the state of North Carolina and putting together an Alpha program. I would like to offer that opportunity to any other states that might be interested, at least to talk and discuss what's the possibilities, what can be had. Now, one of the other things that we did as we grew is we decided that there's a tremendous need for business professionals who may be transitioning into the international arena to also have that kind of exposure. A lot of them have not been exposed internationally, and yet they're taking on these international roles. What are the challenges? What is it like to work across time zones, as was mentioned, or I mean, language situations and cultural situations? It's a very high need area for industries today, and it's being heavily looked for and sought after. I'm going to stop there. I mean, I could talk for days about agriculture. I would like to do one other thing, and Dr. Voss Torres is Ukrainian, and his family is fighting the fight. So what we did was we decided to try an experiment and say, look, there's a lot of need for normalcy to that part of the world right now. So we put together something we call Pen Pal, which allows us to have young people interact with other young people to kind of bring some normalcy back. And we got 500 volunteers the first day, and it's been growing ever since. So that's a program that's kind of close to me. But anyway, that's about it.
Great, thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. So one question I do have for you, Tom, for our audience today, if they wanted to participate, take advantage of agriculture, how would they
Give me $1 million. $500. Okay, come on. $500. In actuality, yeah, just get in contact with me, and we can arrange a Zoom. This is cards, and I can hand them out to you, or you can go to the North Carolina deck and that kind of thing. But the process is one where it's very, very fluid and very flexible. Our thing is to make it available to SMEs that are in high need, and to also spread the word. I mean, this is just the beginning, and like I said, I've been at it for a while with them, and they've talked academics, and I finally got them to say, well, there's a business side of this and an industry side that has high need. So please feel free to reach out. We can make it happen. Our next session is coming up actually in September, and it's a very rigorous process. We have 4 weeks of vetting, not only the students, but the companies. Then we have 8 weeks of actual academics where the things are being done. And then we have a post-analysis where, for another 4 weeks, where reports are being put out and talked about. We need support. We need support. We need financial support. We give back a lot academically to those who are in need. So stipends, scholarships, whatever you want to call them. So it's an interesting organization.
Right, thank you. Any questions for Tom, or Jonathan, or Simona? Our goal was to provide you with some resources that would help small businesses, and certainly Simona did that. Hopefully you have the website where you can access that workspace with all the digital documents. In addition to just the digital documents, there's like webinar training links there as well to show you exactly how to fill out the document, which is very good. Regarding the consulting projects that Jonathan talked about with our university, you're welcome to contact me, and we could get you more information and get you started on that. And then, as Tom said, you can go to xculture.com. Tell you more about agriculture and how to get involved or access that as a resource for your small business.
Fair warning, there are like 350 YouTubes out there, and a whole lot of information that can might be flow through. So just be aware.
So I got one question before we take Ann's question for the crowd. How many DEC members actually go and speak to colleges, universities, or high school trade hands? Well, congratulations for that. So you understand the importance of reaching these students. You know what these students are. Some of you are adjuncts. I'm looking at one in the back corner to the right that's an adjunct. And he's grading 74 papers as we speak probably. But it's important to reach these students. The younger we can get to them, the better. Our joke for the North Carolina deck is we get all the way down to elementary school, and that's just because our executive secretary, that's about the level that he's at. And so when he gets to middle school and high school, it's just too high of a level for him. So, but we do a lot with middle school, high school students. For the first time ever, the North Carolina deck will actually be holding June 2nd a export university tailored for middle school and high school students. We've always allowed college students to come to our export universities and receive the same training as businesses, but we've never done it for the school system. And so for the first time ever, we're doing that. So if we're successful, which I think we will be, the NADEC proposes to help roll this out across the country and share best practices with all of you local decks. So although I am extremely proud of all of you for raising your hands that are already doing stuff with colleges and universities, we want to make sure that we're hitting those students before they make that decision of I'm going to be a YouTube millionaire, and they go through 4 years of school and figure out that TikTok their senior year just didn't get them over the top. So go ahead, Ann.
I just wanted to know what the website is for Simona.
Simona.
It's eddtworkspace.com. So electronic digital big transaction, that's EDTT, that's for, so eddtworkspace.com.
Can we take your presentation? Can you email us the
Yes.
presentation?
How do we do that? I'll send it to Mark and take care of that.
Any other questions?
So I know how you follow your students sometimes.
Your mic up from the camera. I know how you look like you work at your students. Tom, how do you identify your students for your programs?
It's done through the university system, and a number of the universities now have incorporated X-Culture's program into their academics. And so in some cases, they're required to go through it. And the other part of it is, for lack of a better word, a lot of these professors have grant faculty. And so they're excited to get their students engaged in the program because the end, I hate to call it end products, but we are end products of our education system, are so much better. The students come through and amplify what that university has provided to them. They're now, and see, I'm a true believer in global citizens. I mean, if we had global citizens throughout the world and everybody was culturally connected, we probably wouldn't have a lot of the challenges and the problems that we have today, because there would be an understanding that we are different. And within that difference becomes a strength. And so, but that's where most of those students come from the university standpoint. And word of mouth is amazing. Once they've gone through the program, their friends, their families, their brothers, their sisters, everybody is engaged. And we don't have any problem filling the slots. Because we do have a rigorous program before they actually get engaged with the company. And we make sure that they're fluent enough in English. And they have milestones that they need to touch during that 4-week period that are very, very rigorous. And if they don't do it, they're not asked to continue. And because it's so well received, and it's understood by so many of them, they engage themselves. As Jonathan had mentioned, unfortunately, the lack is on the U.S. side. Globally, these young people are very understanding that this is a connected world. Not so much in the U.S., and we're working on it.
So just to answer that question as well, in our case, with the team that went on to work on Jonathan's company's project, all of our students get interviewed. We don't just take the students who apply for it, they each get interviewed. And we pick the best students with the best background, the best skills that are going to do the best job in that type of project.
You can always get the best students. So just
Always. We have one other question.
Yeah, hi, my name is Brian Liu from Nebraska. That I'm very, interested in the what Jonathan and Tom talk about on the foreign student and internship aspect. As we know that, in 90s I was a foreign student, so I, personal experience, how work experience is very important for them. As part of their overall educational experience and for their future, careers. So what I found out that, I have my own company and we actually help University of Nebraska Omaha recruit students, primarily from China. And then a few of the students ended up intern for my company. And I found that, like Jonathan said, they're very, they're very good and they really value experience and very productive. And they understand, international trade. That's where, our business primarily is. And I really hope that the people in this room, give them chances to, to work and enhance their experience. And most of them would go back to their own country. But I think that the experience working in the state, I think will help them, not only themselves, but also they help them in business later. They would probably work later with the state. So it's both sides.
Great comments, great comments. We're going to have to leave it here though, because we're at the end of our session.
Can I just say one other thing? They make lifelong friends through this connection. And matter of fact, we even had a marriage because of this. But so, yeah, I mean, you never know. So
that's not guaranteed. So,
so we're starting to have a dating site. No, I'm only kidding. But it's a remarkable. Internationalism is so important, and how it blends into the future, because these young people coming up are going to have to deal with things that my generation didn't deal with, and so they need to be prepared. That's the best thing to do.
Thank you, everybody.
We were able to.